the new Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt defends the world from a malevolent computer virus that tracks his every move and threatens to devour the world's data. That's scary stuff on and off the big screen. How do I keep my data safe? That's right, NordVPN. You can learn more and try the NordVPN 2-year plan plus 4 months extra by going to nordvpn.com/moviebob or follow the link in the description. Risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. VPNs help you, your PC, your workstation, your tablet, your whatever. I'm an old guy, we just called it the computer. Be in more than one place at one time, even if you're not. In an age where more and more content is getting restricted, siloed, or censored, NordVPN is all about making the internet more free and letting you see and share more information. The way the web ought to be. Like I said, check it out for yourself and see what you might have been missing. Click the link in the description or go to nordvpn.com/moviebob to get the NordVPN 2-year plan plus 4 months extra risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And now, on to the show. Okay, so as we wait for the numbers to roll in for the Memorial Day weekend and see whether Lilo and Stitch or Mission Impossible or both of them saved the American film industry or themselves or whatever we're being asked to hang our hopes and dreams on this weekend, please enjoy some more rambling minutia from yours truly on the business of box office, some of which you may have already heard mixed into the excessively overlong Sinner/Thunderbolts/several other things video posted earlier in the week, but here, somehow at once both condensed and expanded and specified. Anyway, Thunderbolts. Hey, did you see it? I really liked it. You can watch the whole review. But what the reception for that movie demonstrates is a key point. Numbers are real when it comes to the business of film, but box office is kind of fake. And it always had, like, box office numbers, the way that they're reported, the way that they're received, the way that we treat them as a cultural artifact is kind of fake. And what I mean by that is that the way that we treat this concept, what's number one at the box office, how much is a movie made, how much does that matter, kind of a fake thing.
I don't know what you mean, but it had the cadence of a joke.
And the only thing that's really changed between the classic model old Hollywood and the modern corporate version there, from the studio era into the consolidation era and now into the Wall Street venture capital, tech capital era, it's what the scam is and who's running it. And this current tension that you see between the classical model movie studios, or what's left of them in the 80s and 90s, and the modern tech bros and the Wall Street guys, is imagine that classic satirical image of a bunch of gangsters all playing cards against each other, and every guy has 4 aces because they're all cheating.
6 queens. Read 'em and weep.
Not so fast. 7 queens.
And I think the most relevant real-world example that some people generally know of still is Ed Solomon, the screenwriter who is best known still probably for writing Men in Black, the first one, is, I believe to this day, still largely denied most of the money that he was supposed to have made off of his back-end deal for having written Men in Black, a gigantic hit, one of the biggest hits that studio ever produced. And that movie came out in 1997, so it's been a while, and that movie has always made money, always been a hit, hugely merchandised. They've made like 4 sequels to it, there was a series, there have been games, merch, everything, huge hit. Like, you know, everyone knows Men in Black made money, but according to the studio, nah, they're still trying to turn a profit on it. Somehow, in the way that the math has been calculated, the original Men in Black still didn't turn a profit for its studio in such a way that they need to pay their screenwriter the full amount that he's owed by the deal that he arranged, supposedly.
That doesn't make sense.
Because that's the way that old Hollywood was generally arranged in its dealings. It was always about spreading things out, stretching it out long term so that movies made a bunch of money, but always just enough to be stretched and spread, keep the studios going, keep the executives employed, staff and underlings going, spread it, stretch it. And that's why the credits were so long in the categories for every movie of senior executive, sub, vice, assistant, etc. That was the studio system model. It was arranged like a long-term factory family business. A massively corrupt factory family business, but one that was structured to endure in the manner of a for lack of a better word, feudal crime syndicate. But these Wall Street tech guys, the ones who are increasingly in charge of and buying up all of the IP and intellectual property and the studios themselves now, they're running a completely different scam. Just as dishonest, just as corrupt, but their scam is line goes up as fast as possible, load up the debt, load up the product, load up the investment, line has to go up, keep going up faster and faster, straight to the top if you can manage it, and then blow it up and jump out and open your parachute and stick the lower guys with all of the collapse. You know, that Elizabeth Holmes shit, that Enron shit, that Bernie Madoff shit, that 2008 shit.
Kids, won't you step outside for a second?
And those two scams, stretch the business long term, try not to pay anyone, line goes up fast as possible, blow it out at the top and jump out and stick the guys at the bottom. Those are two scams competing against one another. You know, all the guys at the card table can't have four aces. That's the tension now. Anyway, a lot of the people reporting on box office in the digital space only know the line goes up Wall Street version of the scam. So they look at the box office stuff and it's, oh, well, big numbers are the only thing that matters, and they only report on things one way. But Hollywood has multiple different ways to report on numbers and reception. And you can see how studios look at big numbers and small numbers and reception and audience behavior as, okay, a lot of money is good, but it's not the whole story that we want, in the way that they respond to things. Which is where you get a movie like Sinners, which is just crushing it at the box office, making piles of money, and didn't really cost a giant amount to make. You would think Warner Brothers would be doing somersaults about this, but the business deal they made is much more favorable to the filmmaker than it is to the studio on that one, so you can see the studio and the entertainment press, much of which they have a vested stake with, are either downplaying or yeah-butting about that one. On the other hand, we have Thunderbolts. Again, a good movie, a movie that I think deserves the praise that it's been getting as probably the best Marvel movie that's been put out in quite a while. If you watched only the reporting on it, just reception, general buzz, the immediate rush to play the, hey, new Avengers thing as, yes, a gimmick that they were clearly going to launch all along. This was the plan. This is what they were going to do immediately after it came out. It's the whole gag. It's a gag that they've been building to through this entire phase, heading into Avengers Doomsday. I have a feeling that when this is all said and done, what we're going to find out about the whole Avengers Doomsday Kang Dynasty thing is that apart from telling us who was playing Doctor Doom ahead of time, a lot of this probably didn't change much from when this movie was called Kang Dynasty up until now, but that's a whole other thing. If you only went by the tone of the buzz and the way that the media rollout of Thunderbolts is now called New Avengers, and we're heading full steam ahead into Fantastic Four, which we think is going to be a big movie, and we've got 2 more Avengers movies coming out, hey, Marvel's back, guys, you would think that they had really turned this around, and that what has been presented as Marvel box office trouble, which really hasn't been, they've been performing about the way action movies have performed post-COVID, as in, yeah, billion-dollar box office hasn't really come back for superhero movies that don't star Deadpool and or Wolverine. Now that the 3D multiplier, the China multiplier, are no longer factors and streaming has eaten into our profits, this just might be what theatrical box office looks like now. We're not in an era where a movie like fucking Aquaman can do multi-billion-dollar box office worldwide, and may not be again for a while, if ever. But you would think from the tone of the New Avengers retitle rollout and such that Thunderbolts was like a significant big bump up from the reception for, say, Captain America Brave New World. Here's the thing, these movies had about the same box office. In fact, Captain America Brave New World did a little better. It had a holiday weekend, yeah, but these movies performed about the same. The difference is the reviews on Thunderbolts were much better. The audience reception was much better. The momentum heading into the next several Marvel films that they've projected are going to be a big turnaround are much better. And so they're leaning into the momentum. Incidentally, I don't know exactly what the studios do about this.
Are we safe? I don't know.
Even assuming that a few big movies do once again start pulling in billion-dollar plus grosses. As of this audio recording, we're still waiting on the actual numbers to come back in on Mission Impossible and Lilo and Stitch, so the gods only know what those look like. But between shifting geopolitical release strategies, tariffs, the fucking world burning down around us, physical media formats coming in and out of style, disappearing completely, streaming services consolidating, coming, going, disappearing, it just looks very unlikely that that 2010s moment where a again, you could put out a movie like fucking Aquaman. Not to pick on Aquaman, but I mean, come on, there is a reason why at one point they built the entire joke of a season of Entourage, a show that even before it ended felt like it was made on an alien planet, around the absurdity of making an Aquaman movie. But for a minute there, it wasn't that unusual that somebody made a gigantic budget Aquaman movie and it did over $1 billion global because every comic book movie was doing close to $1 billion in the US, and then it also opened in China, and China loved movies that were in 3D and underwater, and Aquaman was in 3D and underwater. So like, whether or not we jump back into that scenario where every Marvel movie does almost $1 billion and every Disney thing does almost $1 billion, maybe some or most of these James Gunn DC things start doing $1 billion, I don't know that world is ever coming back. Just logistically, that feels unlikely. It feels like that was a moment in time.
It was a simpler time. It was a better time.
But then again, who knows? You know, there was that whole end of the studio era period in the, mid-70s when it looked like there weren't going to be big blockbusters ever again, and the auteur era was going to reign forever. And then Star Wars and Jaws happened, right? So who knows? What I think is more likely in the near term is you're going to start seeing movie studios redefine their metrics, in the way that they report stuff, because they're going to settle into a zone where it's accepted that not everything makes $1 billion every time, and they're going to find different ways to grade out their box office. In the same way that they talk about their box office numbers instead of ticket sales, and they don't adjust for inflation. Like, adjusted for inflation, the biggest movie ever is still Gone with the Wind, I think, still. And in terms of ticket sales, actually, I think the answer is also still Gone with the Wind, and probably a shitload of Chinese and Indian movies, just because there's more people, period, to buy tickets in those respective territories. But, they've been ignoring inflation and just discounting number of tickets sold for decades and generations, and just going by raw box office in order to ignore the fact that with the rise of television and with the rise of home media, that box office has been declining for generation over generation over generation. And I think that you'll start seeing them in the near immediate term just redefine their metrics in the same way that video game companies, which has probably been long overdue anyway, in the age of free-to-play, just tanking everything. There's a whole other discussion. This is a movie episode, not a video game episode, but you've started to see companies like the new Doom game, whatever the fuck it's doing on Steam, I don't know, I don't give a fuck really, again, not a video game episode, ignored getting into discussions about sales and amount of money done, because who the fuck can even try to track what a game sells anymore when you're getting dominated in sales by games that are giving their shit away for free? I don't know how anyone makes money in video games now when you're competing against Fortnite. How do you compete against games that are free? And instead, they pointed out player numbers. To me, that makes more sense. Look at how many people are playing. And I have a feeling that movies, you'll probably start seeing more of that jump up in front. Something similar like that, in the same way that TV, long ago, even before the streaming thing came in and just blew it all to hell, moved away from only reporting raw audience numbers and started saying, look how long people are watching, look at which people are watching, look at our prime demographics. Not just how big is the audience, but how valuable is the audience, how committed is the audience. And you can watch the longer, bigger episode that some of the earlier audio was pulled from. Numbers don't lie, but people use numbers to say whatever they want. And I think that you're going to start seeing a lot more of that, because we are probably watching the end of the era of studios just pointing to, look how big, look how many billions of dollars we made, as the only way that they can gauge what their movie did, because almost no one is doing those billions anymore.
And now it's all over.
And now, because fate hates me, just watch, by the time that this video gets fully posted and okayed and run through by YouTube, either Lilo and Stitch or Mission Impossible or both will probably be coasting on their way to doing $1 billion. That Lilo and Stitch movie will probably eventually clear that. That will probably be like $1 billion movie, because everyone loves Stitch. The movie is not really that great, but Stitch is good, and people love the little blue gremlin. I don't fucking know about Mission Impossible, because that movie got retitled and reworked into the end of the Mission Impossible franchise, basically, because the last one didn't do so hot. Because I think people are kind of finally coming around to where I've always been at, that series ain't all that. But you can watch my review for that. Anyway, yeah, watch for Hollywood to start reporting its numbers differently, because they're gonna have to. I'm Bob, and let's see how many more smaller episodes I can cut out of that big one. How about that? Won't that be fun?